Hello, everyone. We are so glad to have you with us today for this webinar on calculating landed cost for exported and imported goods. I'm your moderator, Jenny Alton from the New York Small Business Development Center Central Office. This webinar is brought to you by the International Trade Initiative of the NYSBDC. The NYSBDC is a U.S. Small Business Administration resource partner with regional centers at higher education institutions and outreach offices at other locations across New York State. Our free advising, education, research, and advocacy services are made possible by funding from the SBA, New York State, and our host campuses. Today, we have two presenters. First, you'll be hearing from John Tracy, who is the Senior International Trade Specialist with the U.S. Department of Commerce Syracuse Associate Office. And then you will also hear from our own Dr. Mercedes Sanchez-Moore, who is the Director of the NYSBDC International Trade Initiative. So we are recording today and we'll share links through a follow-up email after the webinar. And John, I forgot to ask you, are slides okay to share? Are you okay with that?
Absolutely.
Okay, because I know we always get that question and I want to make sure that we get it answered for people up front. Okay, so you'll get a link for recording and slides. You are going to be muted today and not on camera. Your chats will be visible to me and our presenters. I will open the chat in just a moment. If you have questions, please do type them into the Q&A or the chat as they come up, and you can open Zoom's Q&A box from the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom window. I'll be monitoring and collecting those so we can address them when we have some question and answer sessions. With that, I will now turn the time over to Mercedes to introduce John.
Thank you so much, Jenny, for your kind introduction. And it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker of today and a very good friend of our initiative, John Tracy. As Jenny said, he's a senior international trade specialist at the U.S. Commercial Service Syracuse Associate Office of the U.S. Department of Commerce, whose primary mission is to help U.S. companies increase their international business and with the creation of Select USA to render assistance to foreign direct investment initiatives. Prior to coming to Commerce, John worked for an international logistics, freight forwarding, and custom brokerage company in Rochester, for a Hong Kong-based steamship line in New York, and managed international logistics for a chemical manufacturing company in New Jersey. A native of Utica, New York, John earned a BS in Economics from Clarkson University and a MS from International Transportation Management from the New York Maritime College. He holds a chartering certificate from the Association of Shipbrokers and Agents, and it is an NYSBDC certified global business professional. So do I. Please, John, go ahead with your presentation.
No, thank you. Firstly, thank you to Jenny and Mercedes for inviting me to the forum and to the New York State SBDC, and for all the educational programming that you do on a regular basis that supports our business community. So thank you for that. Thank you for having me. And hello to everyone. Thank you for your interest in this topic. The presumption that we have, or I had, is that this audience is relatively new to international business and logistics. So please don't be offended if I'm talking about some basic things that you're well aware of. We're trying to make sure that we fill in knowledge gaps right at the foundation. So there'll be plenty of time for Q&A at the end if you want to take a deeper dive into any of these categories or these subjects that we're going to cover. Just determining export landed cost and what that means. Really what we're going to be talking about is what this means and what's behind that calculation, and how to effectively communicate that with the people that you're doing business with. In the case of exporting, it's presumed to be your buyer in a foreign country. So of course you got to start with the definition. It's the easy, cheap first slide that you put in there, but it's the total cost of the product delivered to your customer's door in the case of exports. So that's the landed cost presumed to be landed at your customer's door at the destination. And it includes the cost of the goods, you know, your sale price of the product, plus all the ancillary charges that are tacked onto that as it moves from your door at origin to the destination door. I want to read this out loud. Sorry. This is a crucial figure for business in this definition. It says, especially those in international trade, as it provides a complete picture of the product's true cost, which is essential for your buyer to understand how much it's going to cost to get to his door, so he knows how much room he has between the landed cost and the potential sale price to make a profit on the product. It's also valuable to you to find out if you can be competitive in that market, because you're going to take all your costs to get it to your customer's door, to the market, presumably the foreign market. And if that cost to get it landed at your customer's door is higher than the market will bear because of all the transportation costs that you have, then you know that you've got to adjust what you're doing to make yourself competitive in that market before you even try to enter that market. So that's a couple of reasons why landed cost calculations are used. So the landed cost is the original price of the product, as we've already kind of hinted at in that first definition. Insurance is important, and a lot of people don't factor this in. And if you don't insure the product with a third-party insurer, then you're essentially self-insured. And I used to work in shipping and freight forwarding, and that was the message that we gave to our clients, that, you know, we can sell you insurance as part of your logistics services from we, the freight forwarder or the shipping company. But what's most important is that you have it. If you don't want to buy it from us, that's fine. There's lots of different places you can get freight insurance. You can get it directly from your insurance provider. I worked for a chemical manufacturing company, and we had a rider attached to our plants and facilities insurance that covered inventory in transit. So that's the way we provided insurance for anything that was moving, that was being shipped, being exported. And we had to reconcile our projections on what we were shipping and with what we actually shipped, and that's how we got billed for it. As a freight forwarder, we sold freight insurance in a sense as an insurance broker, where we would insure individual shipments. But what's most important is that you insure it, and the reason for that is that carriers to international cargo shipments can legally limit their liability exposure on loss or damage to freight in transit. And if you look at the back of a bill of lading, all that fine print on there, it will indicate the limit of liability for ocean carriers. Same thing with an airway bill. That's where that language is. That doesn't mean that they're not responsible. What it means is that they can use those protections to limit their liability in the case of a loss or damage. When you insure it, the insurance company writes you a check for what you insured it for. Then they go after the carriers who presumably were responsible for the loss or damage while it was in their custody. So you get paid back what you lost, and you don't have to worry about fighting the carriers to get blood from that stone, as I used to say. So insurance is very important. I think everybody should use it. And you just ask your freight forwarder or your transportation provider, if you don't have insurance for your inventory in transit, to quote you the cost of insurance for each shipment. It's pretty cheap too. I remember it being less than 1%. It may have gone up in cost because I haven't been doing that work in a long time, but figure 1% of the invoice value is what you're going to pay to insure it. And of course, freight from your origin door to the destination door. And we're going to talk about this further and dissect it a little bit, but for a landed cost, you're going to be adding the freight from picking it up at your door to delivering it to the nearest airport or ocean port, all of the freight forwarding documentation charges, and main carriage to the nearest airport or ocean port to the destination, then destination handling fees and delivery charges to the door at destination. And of course, if you're shipping to a foreign country, there's a tariff and taxes component to it, and that's we're going to get into in a second. And of course, other fees, like I just alluded to, like terminal handling charges are popular fees that you see at ocean ports and airports that are tacked on that you have to consider. So the first thing you need to do to determine your duty obligation in a foreign country is to look up what the tariff is on your product. So you need to know what your harmonized system or harmonized code is for your product. The first 6 digits of your Schedule B number should align with the first 6 digits of the HS code used in the country of destination. They don't always. That's the design, but it's not the reality. The reason for that is, so that's the harmonized system is all the countries that participate in the harmonized tariff system align the coding of commodities at the 6-digit level. So the harmonized system code or HS code is 10 digits long. The first 6 should match regardless of the country. And then the last 4 digits are reserved for each country to apply their further breakdown and classification for duty application. So the last 4 digits rarely align, but the first 6 should. Of course, there is another exception to this, is in that each country has reserved their own right of rules of interpretation on how you classify a product. So in one country, you might be selling a electric fan, and the electric fan has an HS code for it. And in another country, the rules of origin say, well, its primary component is electric motor and plastic parts, so we're going to classify it with a different category. This is not a great example, but it's just an example that there's some variability in the system. So it's not always going to be the case that your HS code that you use for classification purposes in the US and at time of export may not match the HS code that the foreign country's customs rules require. So that's why your friend in this process is going to be your freight forwarder / customs broker. All international freight forwarders have a network of agents. That's how they provide their transportation services. So if they're providing transportation services to a European destination, they're going to have an agent or a partner office in that country that's going to catch the shipment, is going to be the bookends for the shipment. They're the ones that can answer questions about classification for your product. So you send them the details, what you use for classification here, and ask them if what the HS code is used in the country of destination, and they'll give you the duty rate. You can also look this up on your own with the all-powerful internet. You can Google tariffs for most countries, just customs tariff, fill in, customs tariff country name, and usually you can find the foreign country's custom tariff published online. A last resort, if your freight forwarder is not helpful in that way and you're not able to find this information on your own, you can reach out to me, and I can reach out to my colleagues that are in the U.S. Embassy or U.S. Consulate in that market and ask them to clarify what the tariff rate or the customs classification would be with the tariff rate, the corresponding tariff rate. So not to beat this dead horse, but you need to know what the tariff number or HS code number is that's applicable to your product importing into that destination country, and you need to know what the corresponding duty rate is for that. And at the same time, you're going to ask, are there any other taxes or fees that I need to be aware of to calculate landed cost to destination? And a great example of this is Brazil. Lovely country, but they're infamous for their laundry list of import taxes that get imposed on foreign imports into the country. So they have a duty component based on the HS code, but then they have a list of additional fees, handling fees, service charges, and that sort of thing that get tacked onto the value of the product before it gets landed to the final customer. So that's number 3 here, determine other taxes and fees might be imposed. Customs fees, value-added taxes, which I'll get to in a minute, local sales tax, destination terminal handling charges, et cetera. And then number four, you need to know if you or the buyer are going to pay the duties and taxes. And this isn't necessarily for landed cost calculation, but this is where confusion comes in. If you're using landed cost to determine what you're going to quote to your partner, to your potential buyer, then that's fine, as long as you're clear that you're going to pay for everything to get it to their door. And they understand that you're doing that. If that's not what you mean, if you're quoting something other than landed cost, you may be giving them landed cost to their door for their planning purposes. But in reality, you may not want to act as an import of record in a foreign country for a number of reasons. So what you're going to quote them as a price is not going to be delivered to their door necessarily, but delivered to the nearest ocean port or airport, for example. So this is the point I'm trying to make here, is simply that you need to communicate clearly with your buyer what you're quoting them. If it's an FOB price or ex works price, which means you're just quoting them the price of the goods at your factory loading dock, they need to know that. If your quote or quoted sales price to them includes delivery all the way to their door, you need to indicate that as well. And if it's somewhere in between, that has to be clarified. And then, of course, this is often determined, the division of responsibilities is often determined by Incoterms. It's not required. Incoterms are not legal terms. But that's a system that has been developed to help simplify and communicate what the delivery terms are going to be. And also always remember that the foreign, and I've already kind of touched on this, the Foreign Customs Authority, the country that you're selling into, is going to ultimately determine what the duty and taxes, what the classification is going to be, and what the duty and taxes correspondingly will be. So that's why it's always great to find out what the proper classification that the Foreign Customs Office is going to use to classify it for duty purposes when it comes in, rather than relying on what you think it to be based on US rules of interpretation in the tariff code. Again, this is why a customs broker and freight forwarder is a good partner that you should rely on. So this is just a walkthrough of a estimated landing cost calculation. So we've used the HS code to determine, or contacted our freight forwarder for assistance in determining what the classification is and the tariff or the duty rate is going to be. So we're going to use, and oftentimes, this isn't an absolute, but oftentimes customs in the foreign country is going to use the CIF Incoterm value, which means what's the value of the product delivered to the cost, insurance, and freight to the nearest port of destination. So I'm using in this example Bremerhaven for Germany, so an ocean port delivery CIF port of Bremerhaven. I'll also make the point here that anytime you use an Incoterm, you need to specify the geographic point, or else it's meaningless. So if you just said CIF port, it could be, especially for Europe, CIF port. One might interpret that to be the first ocean port that the steamship lands at. So it might be CIF Port Amsterdam rather than going all the way to Bremerhaven. But that's why you need to clarify this so that there's no confusion. So I just assumed the tariff rate is 5% CIF, 5% of the CIF value to Port of Bremerhaven. VAT is 19%, which is charged on CIF plus duty. That's why we're using the CIF calculation. And we come up with this calculation here. So you'll see I added insurance, the freight shipping. This is just an estimate. That's probably a low estimate. We don't know what the size of the cargo is, but a $10,000 value. Insurance, I estimated $120 for that, $2,500 for freight. Gets us our CIF value of $1,260. We can use that to calculate the tariff, which is $631. The next slide, we can see VAT is charged on CIF plus duty. times 19% VAT, we come up with that number. And then we can estimate the landed cost. But you can see here, the landed cost, I am presuming to mean that it's delivered to the customer's door in the city of Munich. So I picked that because it's not on an ocean port. So you're going to have definitely terminal handling charges that are going to be charged by the port operator, and then you're going to have local delivery charges charged by the trucking company. So this is how we come up at a landed cost to door Munich, from door origin, your factory, presumably, your place of production, to the customer's door in Munich. So I've said a couple of things that I hope are not contradictory. So I've used CIF value to determine the duty and taxes that I then added on, and then the local delivery charges to get a landed cost. But I have a couple of bullets here, if you will, to wrap up. First of all, you always want to give any landed cost to a potential buyer as estimated, because you don't know how long it's going to be before the actual transaction happens. So rates fluctuate, and there's always the risk that somebody forgot to add a line item in there. So you just want to put estimated to protect yourself, just in case someone says, oh, there's a 4 cents per kilo inspection fee that was charged because customs looked at it and you didn't anticipate that. So this is a way of protecting yourself from that. Be clear on currency used. It's presumed that we're quoting in US dollars, but you shouldn't let that be assumed by anybody. You should specify that you're quoting in US dollars or whatever currency you and your buyer agree to. Value-added taxes are typically consumption taxes, which means that they're passed down through the supply chain. So, me as a buyer in the US will, at time of importation, pay VAT into a European country, but I will then charge it to the next person in line, which would be my consignee, which may not be the ultimate consumer. If that's a distributor, he's going to pay VAT to me and then charge it to the final consumer. So those VAT taxes are intended to be borne by the final consumer of the product. Keep that in mind. If you're paying it, you want to be collecting it. This brings us to the point of, if you're going to be, and this isn't really the subject of this discussion today, but if you're going to be quoting exports, I highly recommend avoiding delivered duty paid DDP shipments to a door destination in a foreign country. That means you're obligated for all the expenses on the buyer side, which are less in your control. So what I mean by that is, number one, if it gets called for customs inspection, you're a non-resident importer of record, not even in that country. It's got to go through customs inspection, and then it gets delayed because it's in a bonded warehouse, which is very expensive. So then you're paying storage charges. You're on the hook for those until customs actually reviews the documentation, clears it. And in the case of value-added taxes or VATs, you can avoid having to pay VAT if you're not acting as the importer of record in the destination country. Even though I said you can collect it back from whoever the next person down the supply chain line is, you can avoid paying duty and taxes entirely by just saying, I'm going to quote this shipment CIF to the nearest airport or ocean port, and then all destination charges are out on the buyer. So you can give them a landed cost to nearest port and just specify that that's what you're doing. And then they'll know that they'll have to pay for customs brokerage fees, the customs broker, and then the duties and taxes and the delivery charges and any VAT. So my fourth point here is, despite giving an estimated landed cost to your buyer, which you might want to do just to give him an idea of how you can get it to his door competitively, or how much it costs to get landed at his door, so then he can consider what he can market it for and what his potential markup could be and still be competitive. That's great. But when you go to actually negotiate the sale deal, I recommend not agreeing to delivering to their door and paying customs duty. You just don't want to do that. So that landed cost in these scenarios that most people use to define landed cost to the door destination is what the Incoterm that corresponds to that is delivered duty paid, DDP. When I was in the shipping world, when I used to work in shipping, we used to tell all our clients, avoid DDP at all costs. Just send it to the nearest port or ocean port and wash your hands of foreign destination costs. So I say, here's the last line here is an example of what you might say with Meyer. Here's our estimated landed cost to your door for your planning purposes, but our sale terms are CIF, nearest ocean port, customs entry, duty, tax, destination fees for account of buyer. And I had a professor at the Maritime College when I was there, and he said, after we learned about Incoterms and the nuances of all the Incoterms, he said, if you're not confident in your understanding of the Incoterm or your client's understanding of the Incoterm you're using, then revert to plain language. Just spell it out. I'm going to pay for shipping to port of fill in the blank. I am not going to pay for foreign customs clearance, duty, taxes, and local delivery. Just spell it out in plain English if you're not comfortable with the Incoterm that you're using, or if you are comfortable with your Incoterm, but you don't believe your client agrees on the definition of the Incoterm that you're using, then just spell it out in plain English. And that's a great way just to protect yourself. I have links here to our website, which is trade.gov. There's a lot of great content on for first-time exporters on trade.gov. You can always email me at any time. It's a huge website, so it's hard to get to some of this information if you don't know where to look because it's so big. But if you're looking for tutorials on certificates of origin, for example, I can point you to that much quicker, but it's all on the trade.gov website. We also have a tariff tool for countries that we have foreign trade agreements with. I think it's somewhere in the range of 16 or 18 countries we have foreign trade agreements with. So you can enter in your Schedule B number or a plain English description of the product, and it'll spit back what the classification is and the tariff for that country. This tariff simulator is more useful on the import side. I don't think it allows you to do this for foreign countries, but it allows you to enter in your product and the value of it in the country of origin, and it spits out what your current duty obligation when you're importing into the U.S. is. And this is a great tool, especially of late, because there's so much movement in the agreements we have with our foreign trading partners. So the duty rates are fluctuating regularly. So this is a great tool to figure out exactly where you are, and keep in mind, of course, anybody that's watching the news knows that they've been moving a lot, and that you and your, in the case of imports, you and the company that you're buying from have to agree how long you're going to honor quotes and that sort of thing. Because if the tariff situation changes and it makes it makes the purchase or the agreement uncompetitive, you need to have a release mechanism or an exit strategy to get out of that agreement if the economics change. So keep that in mind. And as I said before, many countries have their import tariffs online, so you can search by country for import tariff. So sorry about that. Did I get to the end? Yeah, that was that's the end of my slides there. And of course, I'm going to hang around for as long as needed for any Q&A after that.
Thank you, John. And do you mind sharing your email address in the chat? We have someone who would like to contact you.
Sure.
Thank you, John. All right, Mercedes, I believe we are ready with your slides, so go ahead.
Well, first of all, thank you, John, so much for your presentation. I am going to follow up to John's presentation after introducing my program. And as he also said before, we are going to keep a very basic language during this presentation. I am going to cover the importing side, especially some issues that I know it cause quite a bit of confusion for people who are new to importing or exporting. And I will appreciate if you contact me if you have a specific case that you would like to discuss, and I can, because this is complicated, like calculating the tariffs, as John said. I do have many cases right now, and I would love to hear from you. And I will provide you with the email at the end of the presentation. Okay. Let's go ahead, Jenny, please. There you go. So, the New York SBDC is a partnership of the U.S. Small Administration, who is also our funder. We are hosted at SUNY. We also partner with CUNY, the City University of New York State higher education institutions, and the private sector. We provide, as the domestic side of the NYSBDC, consulting, training, and research, and we support entrepreneurship and economic development for the state of New York. Next slide, please. We have over 20 regional centers and 72 outreach satellite offices. We are in an excellent position to be an entry point for the people seeking advice. 98% of the New York population is within 30 minutes of one of our service locations. Next slide, please. There you go. So, we provide both export development and import operations assistance. We are only one of the 3 SBDC centers nationwide that are able to do this. I passed the custom broker license exams. I am not a licensed custom broker, and I will be constantly referring you to contact a professional. But we are able to provide guidance, especially for the people who are starting. We do provide one-to-one client counseling. We organize innovative trainings like this one. We do also market research and provide links to resources from our very dear partners. Global New York, I am sure you know them. They are the state agency for international trade, and they are also the ones that administer the SBA grant called STEP, as well as having foreign consultants overseas. And I would love to introduce them to you in other programs. They normally partner with me very, very often. Then the U.S. Department of Commerce Export Assistance Center, we have John Tracy here representing them. And the SBA, because they do have a special financing for exporting, and now they have also an SBA guarantee financing loan through the working capital pilot. And we partner as well with Exim. They do have the credit insurance that is very necessary to cover commercial risk, when your buyer, especially the risk of payment, or if there are any sort of political risk. Exim also provides financing, but for larger amounts of money. SBA is capped at $5 million in their guarantees, and Exim goes over the $5 million to much of a larger amount. All of our services are free, customized, and 100% confidential. Next slide, please. These are the services that we provide through our center. The first thing that I do is to assess the readiness of the companies that are contacting us. We also assist with the strategic planning of the export transaction, and every single strategy we will add it together and become the business plan. We help our clients targeting international markets, identifying what there is demand for their products, and we also select what type of distribution channels and what type of entry is more adequate for each product. Something super important, and is we help people understand the legal considerations from intellectual property rights to the export administration regulations to contract law, etc. These are very complex and very, you have to take it very seriously. And then we also assist with understanding logistics and export documentation. I had a question in the chat about the certificate of origin, and there is a website called shippingsolutions.com that has actually all the export documents free, so you can download it. We help with market research, as I said, and provide trade statistics that will assist you with the planning and also to understand where there is demand for your products. We provide assistance, accessing financing, grants, and also referral to our many partners, as the one that we have here and I had mentioned before. Next, please. Who is exporting? The majority are small and mid-sized businesses and very small companies with less than 20 employees. Why is important to export? Think about this. 95% of your potential customers are outside of the United States. So the world presents amazing opportunities to increase your sales. And what are the benefits of exporting? Every company that engages in exporting grows faster in average, and also they are more resilient than other companies that are not exporting. They are 80.5 less likely to go out of business. What happens is that you're diversifying your risk and putting your eggs in different baskets and increase actually your opportunities and productivity, and you can increase your innovation in product design and application and being exposed to all the technologies that are being developed in the other side, in other countries other than the United States. Next, please. Oh, can you please pass this slide? I think that this might not be the right, there you go. We also provide assistance to import, as I said, and we do have webinars already recorded on the basic of importing that we can make available to you and explain what is the process. We also provide assistance, as John mentioned, classifying goods with the harmonized tariff schedule and utilize all the tools available from the U.S. Department of Commerce. And also there are tools from customs that are very useful. They have a database of rulings that they have done before, and that is actually super useful when you are trying to classify your product. And we also provide assistance with tariffs. We keep an eye on all the changes. We have a tariff tracker that enables us to do that, and I will appreciate if you email me, and then we can work with you on a one-to-one basis for your cases. As I said before, I am constantly referring people to licensed custom brokers because this, importing as well as exporting, but importing even more. It has very important regulations that are compelling the Code of Federal Regulations number 19. And there are many issues that could cause trouble. If you don't follow the laws, you can find fines and sometimes even be punished by jail. So that's why I like to always refer to a professional. We can find what are the regulations that are going to affect your products that you are importing. And we also assist, especially with the importation of foods. The FDA has a requirement that is very specific to have a certification of overseas facilities, either the ones where they are manufacturing the product or they are storing the product. And they are U.S. customs agents within different ports worldwide to do this, because we are trying to keep our country safe from toxicity, from products that can cause any damage, or from foods that can poison us. We also assist with logistic and documentation. This is different. I mean, there are some similarities, of course, with the export documentation, but there is additional documents for the importation. And as well as with the exporting, we provide the market research and trade statistics that allow you to find suppliers and knowing where you can find what is the best place for you to buy. And we help you also. You need financing. we will help you to find the right loan for this, for importing. Next slide, please. And I'm going to concentrate now, the next slide, on the procurement side of the landed cost. What does it mean is the total cost to have the goods produced and delivered free and clear to your location. That's what it means, the total cost. Next slide, please. These are the similar pricing factors to consider that John was referring to: cost of goods, freights and insurance, customs duties and fees, and taxes. Now, there is a concept that I need to introduce, that it can be applied on an FOB or in a cost, insurance, and fee basis. It doesn't mean that you're going to use only these Incoterms when you are going to do your transaction, but they are applied either under this term, FOB, or under the other, CIF. Next slide, please. Incoterms allows you to shop suppliers by finding where is the best option, and you should do two different price calculations. One is the export price, and the other one is the delivered duty paid price. And again, FOB and CIF have different implications when factoring custom fees and taxes, and they do not correspond within the Incoterm definitions per se. Next slide, please. Here is what export pricing entails. Is the price of the transaction value as the raw price. The goods are sold as is. It's only the goods in itself. It's going to be the packaging. Maybe you have paid commissions to an agent to buy the product. That's part of the price that custom is going to consider. And it is best to use for contrasting supplier on a one-to-one basis. It allows you to identify other costs that are part of the international transaction. With export pricing is a clear and quasi-universal understanding of what this cost is. You avoid any confusion or any hiding of other costs that your buyer might do. It limits, again, unnecessary buffering of the cost of the goods and sets a stage for the true landed cost calculation. Next slide, please. With delivery paid is the total cost to deliver to a particular place, but it might not include some key cost factors and could include some amount of buffer. This is very important. Your buyer, it's not your buyer, your seller in this case, because we are importing, could buffer the price of the shipping, of fees that they say that they have paid, etc., using the delivery paid. The delivery pricing puts the burden on the seller to establish all the costs up front, and it might hide cost-saving opportunities from you as the buyer, and it is more likely to result in a higher price paid than you expected. But still, I advise to get the delivery duty paid because it gives you a very good idea of the total cost. And then later you can go back and start working from the export price and find out what every little item regarding the transportation, regarding the fees, the insurance, etc., are going to be like. But this is a very good idea of how much it's going to cost you to import those items. Next slide, please. Now, this is just a little summary, very basic, very basic, on how to calculate tariffs in 2025. The first step as John mentioned in his presentation, you need to identify the correct harmonized tariff schedule code for your product, and I can help you. I can provide assistance on that, and then determine the proper value, and of course, according to whatever methods customs deem to be legal. And why do I say this? Because the transaction value adds more items than just the raw product in itself. As I mentioned before, it added the packaging, it can add also assist, and this means anything that you have provided your supplier to manufacture goods for you. It could be molds, or it could be tools, or it could be a machinery, etc. That becomes part of the true value of the goods according to customs. Then you need to determine the country of origin where you are importing goods, and go to the harmonized tariff schedule of the United States and look at the column 1 duty rates. Now, this year, everything has changed, absolutely everything. But also, something that you need to check is for specific tariffs. Right now, there is a 50% tariff on steel, aluminum, copper, also trucks have a separate higher tariff than the rest, and you can determine the percentage in your bill of lading, bill of materials. What is the percentage of these really expensive materials, and just pay the 50% on the component of steel, for example, and then you will pay a lower tariff on the rest of the materials that form part of your product. You need to add as a basis the 10% universal tariff, and then find which are the country-specific or product-specific tariffs. I am providing 2 websites here that are very useful. This one is from the U.S. International Trade Commission, but the second one, I like it because it is a tracker. So if there are any changes, this is going to be plugged in this tracker, and also tell you some things that were proposed, if they were approved or they were not approved. And I found that it's extremely well upgraded. So please copy this link. You will receive my presentation, but have a look at this website. After that, you need to apply the rate to the customs value. And then keep in mind that there are also anti-dumping and countervailing duties that could apply. We are not gonna extend or explain what these are, but just to let you know, sometimes the government places anti-dumping duties when they think that a country is selling underprice. And if they're trying to sell, that is called dumping. When they sell underprice, it hurts the domestic economy. So that's why the government might decide to apply these duties. Next slide, please. So, as I said before, we are going to be using FOB and CIF to determine how customs in each country is going to calculate duties. FOB countries are United States, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, and they apply duties based on the cost of the raw goods, okay? On the cost of the goods itself only. Now, CIF countries, which it could be Mexico, Egypt, etc., apply, and most of the countries of the world, apply duties based on the cost of the goods, the insurance, and freight. That is a heck of a difference, and I'm going to give you an example here. Let's say that the price of the goods is $10,000. The freight and insurance is $3,500, and the duty rate is only 10%. I think that we are talking about UK. UK has a 10% rate. It's the only country that has this low rate now in tariffs. So if we calculate the FOB method, you see here, they are multiplying the duty rate, the 10%, to the price of the goods. And we add the shipping cost plus the insurance, and we get $14,500. Now, if we apply this on the CIF method, now we need to include the 10,000, we need to add the freight and the insurance. And to this larger amount, we need to apply the 10% tariff rate. And we end up having $14,000, $14,850, which is a $350 more expensive. All right, so that's why it's so important to understand that in the invoice, and when you are dealing with your buyer, please ask them to clearly specify what is the price of the goods, not to give you a bulk that adds the freight and insurance, because they're going to assume that this is the same that in their country if they are going to pay for the freight and the insurance. Please separate the price of the goods very clearly. This is going to appear in the airway bill of lading and the bill of lading as the FOB price, and then list what is the freight and insurance, and then later look up for the duty rate that this good have. Next, please. So these are all the costs that are going to take place when you are importing into the United States. And it's important that you understand which ones you should request your seller to cover or which ones are best for you to cover. In the freight cost, for example, the pre-carriage is the transportation to the first port of loading from origin. And it says here is best covered by the seller. Why is that? Because they do know their country, they do know who are the shippers, they do know how to organize this transportation much better than you, that you don't know who you should call to do this pre-carriage. Then the main carriage, it could be either covered by the seller or the buyer. This is the transportation from the port of loading to the port of discharge. Okay, so this is for you to negotiate which one is best, and also maybe you should get a quote and then find out what quote your seller is getting, and then compare if it's good and choose either or. And then on the on-carriage situation is the transportation from the port of discharge to the final destination, and it is best covered by you, the buyer. Why is that? Because you know here what are the transportation companies, what is the best method to transport, etc. So this is why, I mean, this is just assume that you know. If you don't know, we can give you advice, and we can give you actually a list of transportation companies that could help you either transport the goods by air, by ship, by truck, whatever is convenient in this case, or by rail. Okay. Now you need to understand that apart from the duties, when you are importing, there are fees applied by U.S. Customs. One of them is the merchandise processing fee, and especially this is applied for a transaction that is over $2,500 and has a formal entry. A formal entry is executed when the goods are the goods are worth more than $2,500, and right now in 2025, as we are, this is the percentage, and it's calculated ad valorem. So the minimum is going to be $32, and the maximum is going to be $65.50. This has changed this year. It has become more expensive. Now, for informal entries of goods that are less costly, less than $2,500, it's gonna be like $2.06 or something like that, something really not very important. And this is another fee, which is the harbor manufacturing freight, managing freight, and it is a flat percentage to all the goods of 0.1 to 5%, and this is only for goods that are arriving by sea. Okay, on a shipment. Then take into account that there are going to be fees from the freight forwarding part, the one that is sending the goods towards you, that's the freight forwarder, and then also from the custom broker, who is the person who is going to do the clearance at the port. All right? And usually they charge a nominal fee, like a flat cost, okay? There are also additional fees that you don't see, that many people don't realize, and is depending on the method of payment, if you're going to get a letter of credit, that it has a cost, okay? Also, when you are going to do currency conversion, it might also be, there might be also be a cost associated with the transaction from your bank. Next slide, please. Well, here is my email. And again, these questions are much better answered on a one-to-one basis, because sometimes the case is too broad to answer in 2 sentences, and I might require additional information. So if you have questions about exporting, you can either reach out John Tracy and use the resources that he has provided, or you can also contact us. We also have resources as well. But yeah, and if you are importing, please contact me directly, and then I will see about your case. Okay. Thank you, and this concludes my presentation.
All right.
Thank you.
So now we will invite John back on screen and work on answering questions. I know that you have been both typing some answers out. I do want to go through questions just so that these answers can be said out loud, and other people who may have the same question can get the answer as well. And anybody else who would like to ask a question, feel free to drop that in the Q&A box or the chat. We're monitoring both. Now, this first question was a clarification on insurance, and they wanted to know if insurance is able to cover freight also. So let's go ahead and have you answer this out loud. I believe, John?
Being a freight forwarder.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So freight often does. And I put in the chat there that when I worked for a freight forwarder, we had an underwriter partner that we sold coverage through. And we sold typically door to door, full insurance. And as Mercedes, I think, put in there, that coverage was all risks, which included political instability risks and anything that could happen to the shipment, acts of God and everything in between. But the conversation, you have to have that conversation with your buyer in the case of exports to find out who's going to insure it and to where. So I think it's cleaner, say, if I'm quoting to a foreign buyer for an export, I'm going to say I'm going to ship it to use the example that we started with earlier, the CIF Bremerhaven, which means I'm going to insure it to Bremerhaven, and I'm going to cut my insurance there. So I'm going to ship it and insure it to Bremerhaven, but then I'm washing my hands of it. And what that meant for my customers, that we were quoting full insurance to destination door. But if they just wanted to insure it to CIF Bremerhaven, they're of course going to save some money on that insurance because they're not extending the coverage all the way to the risk coverage all the way to the door of the customer. So it's a negotiation, and it's something that should be talked about out loud, which never happened in reality. My customers were not thinking about this level of detail most often when they were negotiating the sale of their products. But they really need to have detailed discussion about not just who's going to insure it, but what coverage is going to be expected.
So it's related to the pre-carriage, main carriage, on carriage concept that I was talking about, that normally insurance is for the main carriage, what I have seen, although you can request it to the end, and also for the 3 legs if you want to. Right.
And alternatively, if you were selling selling exports, X Works, which is what a lot of people think of as FOB origin, but it's really X Works, which means that you're making the product available, or you're going to usually load it onto the conveyance of the buyer at your facility. Then then there's no reason for you to insure it at all. But you do want your buyer to insure it, just to ensure that they're going to be able to follow through with payment, depending on what payment devices you're using. But you want to have that conversation, and you don't want to insure it to your customer's destination if you're selling X work. That doesn't make any sense to me. So that's why you should be talking about it. It can be, any insurance policy can be modified for the specific shipment. And as long as you're talking about it with your customer, then you can make sure there's no gaps in your coverage, I guess.
Right. Thank you for those very thorough answers. Appreciate that, hearing about options. Okay. So now I know that I would like to use this as a bit of a case study. So we had somebody who asked a question specifically. There's an exporter wanting to export furniture from Brazil to the New York area, business to business and business to consumer. And so if, let's say that this business came to either one of you, what would be the process that they would expect? What process would you walk them through, just to help people understand maybe a little bit more in detail?
Well, that's one of the questions that I sent, that they better email me and I could
Yes.
follow up, because it's kind of
Absolutely
involved. But it's the basics that we explain. Is first identifying the harmonized tariff code of that particular item, and then contacting a freight forwarder, negotiating with the other party what are the terms, the commercial terms of the sale, who is paying for what, who's going to be responsible for what, then get a quotation for the transportation and knowing how much it's going to cost, and calculate, if you can, the landed cost through finding the, in this case, what are the import tariffs that they're going to find coming to the United States. As John mentioned, make sure that you understand what is the location where the items, the transportation could be in country, in the middle of the sea, or the main transportation, or once it is in the United States. So that is what entails. But it's more complicated than that, because it's going to also require for people to understand how you are going to pay, getting paid, etc. And also what are the regulations, what are they bringing, and I'm looking up at there might be some requirements for wood products in the United States, specifically they have been fumigated sometimes, etc., to avoid pests. So it's more complicated. You cannot just, we could do a webinar on how to import furniture from Brazil to the United States.
Understood. And John, what might somebody, if they get in touch with you, what might somebody expect if they had like this type of business?
Well, I apologize at the beginning of my presentation. I didn't explain that the U.S. Commercial Service that I work for is charged with export promotion from the U.S. So we are export focused.
Related. Yes.
So if someone called me to ask me how to walk through the import process, I would probably refer them to their customs broker or freight forwarder. If they don't have one, then I would say find one, and I can certainly give you a list of freight forwarders and customs brokers that operate in my area, or you can do a Google search on your own to just search for a freight forwarder or customs broker, or better yet, ask your business friends who they use and get a referral from someone that they work with. And the freight forwarder customs broker can walk you through that. They can tell you, this is what the quote means. This is the Incoterm they're using. This is what you're going to be responsible for when it gets to port. These are the documents that we need from your supplier in Brazil to clear it through U.S. Customs. And this is what it's going to cost for us to do all that for you. And then you'll have a better idea. And you will certainly alleviate a lot of anxiety, because you'll be working with someone that knows how to do this and tells you upfront what to expect before you commit to shipping it. So I would point them to a freight forwarder customs broker. A lot of companies then say to me, or people that want to be importers for the first time say to me, well, can I do this myself? Well, sure, go ahead. I don't recommend it, especially the first time. I mean, if you you can do your own customs entries. If you're a seasoned importer that knows what needs to be done, then sure. But most of, and again, when I work for a customs broker freight forwarder, most of my seasoned importers and exporters realize what it takes to file paperwork and customs entries and track freight and get it moving to the customer's door. And they know how much work and effort that takes. And they always sided with outsourcing it. I had one customer in the 15 or so years I did that business who said, no offense to you, but I'm going to take over the logistics of my business. And he was importing all sorts of stuff from Asia. And after 1 year, he's like, no, I'm done with that. I'd like you guys to do that for me.
I'd rather pay somebody to do that.
Yeah. So if you're first time importer, absolutely you need a customs broker, especially for a commercial transaction. No question about it. If you want to try to do it on your own after you get some experience doing it, then okay.
Yeah. We are able to provide general information about the process and what it's going to take. We are going to refer them to a custom broker, but at least to let them know what is going to require, how is the process going to take place. And then we will provide them with 3 referrals of custom brokers, depending on the area where they live in New York. So that's what we do normally.
Awesome.
The other thing that I would add, and I think actually Mercedes already said it, but I just want to reinforce it, that you have to also discuss payment mechanisms. Yes. How are you going to pay for this? And the Brazilian supplier, if they're an exporter already, will have a recommended, or they'll have a system or method of payment that they recommend or ask for. You might want to reach out to your banker and say, hey, does this look okay? Are you in agreement with what they're asking me to do, and can you help me do this? You want to be clear on that as well. Make sure that you're protecting your interests in payment and title transfer of the goods.
Yeah, take into account what is the currency that they are trying to use, etc. So.
Thank you. I hope that helps maybe set a little bit of some expectations of what people might encounter if they were in that position. Okay, so our next question, as you mentioned, Mercedes, we had somebody who had questions about certificate of origin. And so do you mind dropping the website link that you mentioned?
I know who did the question, and I will communicate with her personally and send her the form and the explanations.
Okay.
And by the way, also John mentioned the site, the trade.gov and the shipping and logistics. They also had a very good video about that. So I will send this person a specific information on where to download the form and also get instructions on how to fill it out.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. Anything that you would add about certificates of origin, John?
No, Mercedes, thank you for that link to our website at trade.gov. As I said before, there's a lot of great resources, especially for first-time exporters. Yes. And we have a whole section on customary shipping documents that are requested, yes, and an explanation of what they are and where to source them if they're not something you can create yourself. But yeah, that's a great way to, and again, your freight forwarder, customs broker, we provided certificates of origin all day long. It was part of our services, whatever was required. Some were for very involved, which required them to be consularized in Washington, D.C. And then, so we were doing those kinds of certificates of origin, which are required by some destination countries, but then there's some that we printed off our desktops ourselves that satisfied the certificate of origin requirements. So it depends on who's asking for it in the destination country, how complicated a certificate of origin has to be. Most Middle Eastern countries have a consularization requirement, which adds some expense to it, which requires them to stamp it at their embassy or consulate in New York, embassy in DC or consulate in New York.
Thank you. Yeah, so look for those trade.gov resources, and there is help available. So good to know. Thank you. Okay, so I know that you talked about FDA approval and needing FDA approval for food products, correct? And so we had somebody who was particularly interested in coffee, so they
Yes.
would indeed need that FDA approval, correct?
Yes. And regardless of the country where the of origin of the coffee, the U.S. always requires this certification from the producer or either from where the goods are stored. My advice always is try to find a supplier that is already certified. That's the easiest way. Trying to find a source that is already exporting products. So how can you do that? I'm going to tell you the trick. Go to the New York Library, and there is in the business center, they have a librarian that handles the Panjiva website. Panjiva is a super expensive website that has exporters and importers. You can contact us to get the harmonized tariff schedule for coffee, specific, that coffee that you want. And then through that harmonized schedule number, the librarian can use the Panjiva website and tell you where is the coffee that is coming from whatever country. And then you can find listed there, companies that are exporting that product. Most likely they are the suppliers of that product already. So there you go. You don't have to start looking, doing wild searches, by going to the library and get, because these are statistics and these are people that are already exporting the coffee. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Anything you would add on that, John?
No.
Okay. So question then too, this person also asked about a pet product. So does that FDA approval extend to pet consumables as well?
Yes. Yes, it does.
Okay, perfect. So
But
yes to
there
both
are
questions
specific
there.
regulations. Yeah, but there are
Mhm.
specific regulations for pet products that need to be checked.
Okay,
Okay, they're not going to be
awesome.
the same for coffee, or for other
Right.
products. There are specific regulations that we, I can try to find the regulations for them. Also,
Okay.
a very good source is the Foreign Agricultural Service (FAS), and they have a very rich website, and they are part of the U.S. Agricultural Service (USDA). Okay.
All right. And so we did have just a follow-up question on the coffee. So steps would be the same if the product were from Jamaica, anywhere
Doesn't
else,
matter.
doesn't matter. Okay.
Doesn't
So
matter.
hopefully that helps that person.
Mhm.
Um, okay. And I love that you brought up research, because something that we haven't talked about yet in this webinar is our own Research
Yes,
Central.
exactly. We have a really good
So
one.
we have some fantastic research librarians who work for the NYSBDC, and their job is to answer questions that clients have. And so if you do have a specific question about your international business, and it's not something that Mercedes knows offhand, or something that's very specific that has to be looked up, etc., we have this fabulous resource that they can go and into all of these different databases, different information sources, and pull information to answer your question. So I just wanted to make sure that we talked about them in this webinar too, since they're a fantastic resource.
Great.
And so somebody wanted, so the person who asked that question about the coffee wanted to know how exactly that is spelled, that resource at the library. Do you want to drop that in the chat?
Jiva,
Okay.
yes, I will do that. I
Okay,
will
if you'll
do
put
that.
that in the chat, that would be
Yes.
perfect. So they can take that straight to the library then.
Yeah, they can
Okay.
contact them by phone actually and tell them
Oh,
that
okay,
they are.
great.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, so Panjiva, and we've got that. All right. Now, we had somebody who had a question about if you could comment on responsibility for filing SED for export clearance and the process to do so.
The shipper export declaration. John, do you want to take it?
Sure. The shipper's export declaration historically was an actual piece of paper, the SED that we refer to. Now it's all done online through the automated export system, AES. So you're filing AES. So if someone says who's filing AES or providing SED, it's synonymous. So whoever's saying SED has probably been at this for a while. But for filing AES, it's the exporter is, or what is really defined. This is going to get in the weeds a little bit, but the U.S. The UPPI, principal party of interest, the United States origin. No, it's not United States principal party of interest. I think is what it stands for.
Principal party of
interest, the UPPI, yeah, which is typically the exporter. So that when the intent for Census is the one that collects this information, which is under Department of Commerce, and they're collecting it for tracking trade data mostly. So the intent was, when the government instituted this requirement, was that all exporters would provide the AES information, which is information, biographical information about the shipment. It's the details of the shipment, the description, the Schedule B number, which is a subset of the harmonized system code, but it's essentially the tariff code. The value, the shipper, the consignee, any intermediary, the freight forwarder, shipping company, whatever. So you enter all the details of the shipment through the AES system. And it's required before the shipment to leave the country. So any carrier is going to make sure that once you file AES as an exporter, you get back a transmission code, an XDN code that verifies that you submitted this information to the government. One of the things that's important about that is that what comes back is a code that doesn't have any proprietary information about the shipment. It just says that you have filed this information with the government. So that's, your pricing, your value of the shipment, which might be your FOB or ex-works pricing, not necessarily the commercial invoice to your customer, is separate, and it's concealed. It remains proprietary. What goes on the shipping document, the bill of lading, would be the XDN number, which tells everybody this has been filed in AES. So the intent is for the shipper, the exporter, to do it. What happened, and has happened, is that the freight forwarders have offered it as a service. So yes. A lot of exporting companies will outsource it to their freight forwarder, who will gladly charge them for the service of filing their AES. Yes. And that's acceptable. You can assign them as an agent to do this for you. However, you're responsible for your freight forwarder's reporting of your export transactions. If they make any errors, they're not responsible, you are. I shouldn't say they're not responsible at all. They may be found to be at fault, but ultimately you're the one that's going to pay the penalty if there's intentional misreporting of what the transactions are. So I don't mean to make everybody nervous. Most freight forwarders are using the information that their shippers are giving to them, and everything works well, and they make a little money for the service. And if you're an occasional exporter, the AES system is pretty user-friendly, but if you don't go in it daily, you forget, oh, how do I fill this out? What information goes in box 16, that kind of stuff. A freight forwarder that's doing, hundreds of shipments a day, they can file an AES filing in probably 2 minutes. If you're making 6 shipments a year, every time you go into the system, you're going to have to take the tutorial again to figure out how to get to the system. So there's the reason why freight forwarders are successfully offering this as a service. But ultimately, it is the USPPI, which is usually the exporter. Now, the reason this question is really important, though, is if you are selling ex works or even free carrier at origin port, meaning you're turning the cargo over to your buyer at your facility, they're picking it up from you with their own freight forwarder, or you're shipping it to the nearest port of export and turning it over to their freight forwarder there. But on the origin side, you're turning it over. You have to make sure that gets filed, and a lot of exporters assume that they're not the exporter because they're selling it domestically. They're selling it from their door here in the U.S. They're not arranging any exports. They're selling it kind of domestically, but they're selling it to someone that's going to ultimately export it. They're still ultimately responsible for making sure that it gets filed. They can have the freight forwarder that's employed by their buyer do it for them, but we always recommend making sure they confirm that they do it by giving you an XTN number, verifying that the AES information has been filed as required by law.
Yeah, this is called export clearance, that process.
Yeah. So if you're selling ex works domestic or free carrier domestic, then make sure you have that conversation with either the buyer or the buyer's freight forwarder who's picking up the freight from you, who's going to file it. If they're not filing it, then you should be filing it.
And your freight forwarder should have a power of attorney from the
Yes,
shipper,
absolutely. Yeah.
allowing them to fill out that documentation.
Yeah. And most freight forwarders and customs brokers, if you enter into a new relationship with them, the first thing they're going to lead with is fill out a power of attorney. So I have,
Yes.
so you're appointing
on the
me
documents.
agency. And it doesn't mean that you are exclusive to them. You can have 10 powers of attorneys with 10 different freight forwarders and customs brokers. It just empowers them to act as an agent on your behalf.
All right. And it's interesting that you brought that up because we do have a question related to kind of the responsibility of things moving forward. This person says, what if you are a manufacturer and you ship your product to a legally allowed country, but then they ship to a banned country? What is your responsibility there, and how would you go about protecting yourself?
You first have a disclaimer in all your documentation that goods are not allowed to be diverted, that this is intended for a certain person. He's going to tell you that, but also make sure you have a conversation with your buyer from the get-go, explaining what are the regulations of the United States. And there is a disclaimer actually that they can place in their documents, and John is going to talk more about that.
Yeah, the anti-diversion clause, when I worked in freight forwarding and shipping, we had our system would automatically print the anti-diversion clause onto the bills of lading that we cut. That doesn't prevent shipments from being diverted. It happens. But my answer would be this. There's no way you can 100% protect from it. However, if you have, and this sounds like this person asking the question has suspicion that they might be diverting this cargo, and that could be by virtue of what they're buying. You know, if someone from a country that doesn't buy electric circuit boards or something, they don't have an industry that would use the product that they're buying from the U.S., then that's a red flag right there, that they're likely not, it's not going to end in the country that the buyer is representing. Then they have an obligation to ask the questions. Where's the ultimate destination of this? And they also have the right not to enter into that transaction if they think it's going to get them into trouble. So if you see red flags, then investigate further. You're obligated to do that. If you see red flags and you ignore them and you can pursue or follow through with the transaction, and it's discovered, then they're going to come back to you and they're going to ask you questions. Did you see a red flag? Why didn't you stop doing what you were doing? And there's definitely risk of punitive damages if you proceed when you know that there's red flags. So it's self-policing in a sense, but trust me, you don't want to get involved with something that looks fishy. Just avoid it. Unless they give you a reasonable explanation and they can say, well, no, this is what we're using it for. And if they give you a reasonable explanation and you have no reason to fear that these things are going to be diverted, then I think you're safe to proceed as long as you've asked the questions and you've gotten reasonable answers. And I had a client, for an example of this, it was subject to license control. So it was alloys, titaniums and that sort of thing that can be used in the aerospace industry, is used in the aerospace industry. And the seller was selling to a distributor in Germany, and that German distributor supplied the aircraft industry, aerospace industry in Europe. And they asked who the where the final destination of these products was going to be, and the distributor in Germany said, I can't answer that because I'm taking this into my inventory, and I pass products through my warehouse as they're demanded by my customers, but I don't know who's going to buy this. I'm buying it from you, putting it into my inventory in my warehouse, and then I'm not sure who's going to be buying this. So that was a sufficient answer. I talked to the Bureau of Industry and Security, who regulates exports of dual-use products, and they said as long as he asked the question and he got a reasonable answer, that's fine. So
Thank you
So
for sharing that example. Yeah, it helps to hear a specific example.
and
Okay.
that was kind of branching off into licensable products, and I shouldn't have gone there, but
It's all
let's not
helpful
go down that
information.
rabbit hole too far.
No worries. We'll do one last question today. So, do either of you in your resources have any lists of reliable insurance providers, export and import? And in addition to that, anything like a checklist with tips or due diligences as somebody is looking at hiring somebody for their services?
It depends on the location of the person. And I sometimes reach out to my contacts as well, if they, and even my clients, if they don't mind sharing who they are using, if they have a good experience. I found out that this year the prices are kind of crazy. So it's good to shop around and ask for different quotations. Okay, so it depends on the product, but it's super expensive. I mean, some have a couple of clients with really, really outrageous quotations for insurance. So shop around.
Anything you would add on that, John?
Yeah, so is this for service providers? Is that what they're asking? How would you qualify service providers?
No,
Oh, insurance,
insurance.
insurance. All right.
Insurance
What
So
kind of
providers.
insurance.
insurance?
So I worked, as I said, for a freight forwarder customs broker for years, and we had an insurance underwriter, and we provided. It was essentially our product, the service, the insurance that we provided. So most freight forwarders and customs brokers will offer to quote you insurance, and it will be through a third party underwriter. So that's one way of doing it. Alternatively, you could do a Google search. You'll see, of course, the results that you'd expect from a Google search. Those that pay for ads will get a higher profile. The other way to do it is if you have an insurance, if you're in a viable business with an insurance policy, contact your insurance broker or your insurance agent and say, hey, I need to look at costs for insuring costs and options for insuring my inventory in transit, whether it be imports or exports. And they will offer to give you options. So you can compare them. A lot of my customers, when I worked in freight forwarding, I would tell them about the option of getting insurance on their own through their own policy providers, which is cheaper. When I did it for that chemical manufacturing company, it was the cheaper way to do it, but it also added a layer of work and effort because I had to do I had to maintain spreadsheets and reporting of all the traffic that we're moving. And some companies just would rather pay a per transaction fee, cover per shipment. And some prefer to do it that way. So it's really a matter of preference. After you look at the options, you can decide, is it worth for me to pay a little higher to procure this insurance through my freight forwarder customs broker? It saves me a lot of time if they just manage it for me versus managing it myself with my underwriter.
But we also, there are many types of insurances because it could be for the transit portion, or it could be the product liability insurance in itself, or it could be the insurance credit, export credit insurance that is different, So that's why it needs to be specified the type of insurance that it is.
Right. Great point. And export credit insurance, we really didn't get into that too much, but that's a really interesting tool. XM, the Export Import Bank of the U.S., provides that, but you can also get it through your commercial bank. They'll provide foreign receivables insurance, and foreign receivables insurance is just what it sounds like. You insure the commercial invoice value against non-payment. So if you're worried about not getting paid, but your buyer is demanding that he doesn't pay upfront for the shipment, then you can insure that. And it does two things. It ensures that you get paid if they default, but it also puts it on, from an accounting perspective, it puts it from a liability to the asset column on your spreadsheet so that foreign receivables that are insured are considered an asset by your lenders. So it doesn't mess up your lending base. It's an interesting, really neat tool that I think is underutilized for exporters, but it definitely alleviates the anxiety that most exporters have. They're like, I'm worried that this guy's not going to pay me, once I ship this, but he's insisting that he's only going to pay me half up front, and then once he gets a bill of lading that proves it's on a ship on its way to him, is he going to pay the other half? And I want to say yes, so I can conclude the sale. I want the sale. The salesman in me wants that, but I'm assuming 50% non-payment risk if I don't insure it. So the way to fix that is you insure it. The insurance for foreign receivables insurance is like half of 1% of the commercial invoice value. It's super cheap, and it covers you for everything.
Thank you so much, John, for coming and sharing your expertise. And of course, our own Dr. Mercedes Sanchez-Moore, always appreciated. As we wrap up, I do want to remind everyone that we will have a survey that will appear on your screen. And if you have just a few minutes to give us some feedback and let us know other topics that you're interested in learning about, we always appreciate hearing from you. And we have some thank yous in the chat, so I just want to relay those on to the two of you. And a very helpful comment. Yeah, so definitely fantastic information for our attendees today. With that, we will wrap up unless you have anything else that you want to share, either one of you.
Well, I want to
Go ahead,
encourage
Mercedes.
people. No, I just wanted to encourage them if they have, like this case of the furniture from Brazil, or cases that are like the coffee, for example, they can reach out. If it's an important issue, they can reach out to me without any problem to the email that I have shared, and I can have a look at their particular cases, exporting as well. But as I said, Mr. Tracy here is the expert when it comes to lots of the issues, especially freight forwarding and so on and so forth. The U.S. Department of Commerce. So we both provide counseling.
Excellent. And I do want to remind everyone, here, will you drop your email into the chat, Mercedes, just so we make sure everybody has that. And I know we dropped John's earlier, so check the chat for that if you are wanting to get a hold of John. As a reminder, all NYSBDC services, Mercedes' services, as well as the Research Central that we talked about that can look up information for your specific type of business, these are no cost. So we are a government-funded program here to help small businesses. So we would love to hear from you and be able to help you with your specific case. And John, any last comments today?
Yeah, I'm in Syracuse, New York, which is the center of the state here. And at the moment, I cover Buffalo, Western New York, and some of the North Country. But if you're not in that territory, definitely reach out to me. I can help you, or we can have a conversation. But if we get into a deeper dive, then I will pass you to my colleague that covers the geographic territory in which you're in. So there's more than just one of us. We're across the country. And I'd be happy to make that introduction, but I'm also happy to answer questions about what we talked about today.
Excellent. Thank you so much, John.